Okay, hello everybody. It's Monday, November 25th. According to the account that I track on Twitter, we're 90% of our way through the year. Crazy town. And almost to the end of the decade too, which is a really interesting thing. I'm very curious about perspectives on the turn of the decade. But so I'm Tony. We got Thanksgiving coming up this week. We got a lot of fun going on around that. Jen and Lucas here. Jen, Lucas, looks like it's going to be a quiet crowd today. So I hope y'all have lots to talk about. Why don't you give us your updates, and we'll start with Jen. Jen, take it away.
Hi. Let's see. So we had our town hall, not this past week, but the week before, and it was super successful. And I can share a synopsis that we wrote for everybody. We came away with, let's see if I can show you guys here in my office, we came away with like pages and pages of feedback that we did the unconference style. Yeah, that was really good. That was really good. And then people went and check marked the ones that resonated with them. So I'm really glad that we did it that way. Yeah, it was really interesting talking about people's pain points. I guess one of the things that is a little confounding for me right now is the childcare piece, because like so many other co-working spaces that have tried it, people say they want it, but then when you follow up with them, it doesn't. Well, it's just not gaining traction for us. So I started we haven't met yet, but I reached out to a bunch of other co-working space owners that also have childcare, and we're going to do a Zoom call sometime in December. We've got about 8 people interested in participating. And I know that Iris and Laura are also doing a Women Who Co live chat about it tomorrow. So just really interested to know about how other people make it work, because right now it's not a drain, but it's also not adding anything.
Yeah.
It's a 300 square foot room I've got that's grossly underutilized. And not to mention something that philosophically I really want to offer people. So just a little frustrating that it's not gaining traction, like I said, but I'm working to talk to those people. Also, I've identified a few people in my community that I consider to be influencers, and I'm just going to be honest with them and say, hey, how come this isn't landing? What are your thoughts? What are your feedback?
Right.
See what they have to say.
Okay. All right, cool. So I feel like there's there's probably a lot we could dive into in terms of your town hall and your takeaways and how you handle things from here. So if we have time, I'd like to dive deeper. And I think it's also, I'm sad that you're experiencing the challenges that you are around the lack of interest in daycare. However, I'm glad that you're tackling it head on and not trying to, not being blind about the reality of the challenge that you're facing selling it. And it's kind of annoying, because it's like, it sounds like one of those cases of something that everybody says they want, but when it comes time to actually show up and pay for it, all of a sudden people disappear.
Yeah.
It's
like I said, it's not going to break us, because we purposely set it up as gravy in our P&L. So it's not like anything's really riding on it, but damn it would be nice if it was successful.
Well, and it's part of your message too, right? And I'm thinking about the story of Day House and what its identity is, and we've been thinking of it in terms of it being something where daycare is a part of the equation, and I wonder what that means in terms of where you're able to kind of adjust the identity going forward. The advantage that you have now actually is that you have a bit of empirical experience with what is the identity of the people who are showing up, so that we can start to adapt to the reality of who is showing up and what trends are there. Does it become more about parents, even if they don't bring their kids? Does it become more women oriented regardless of if they're parents? You know, like maybe there's kind of a slight direction that you can shift towards there.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation if others are open to it, because I know it's a little bit of a niche, but I definitely have some thoughts and need more thoughts. And I just posted a link to our synopsis for the town hall.
Got it. Yeah, I've got it. And it looks all pretty, like it's ready to go into a blog post or a web page or something. Wow, you have really great fonts and color choices.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. So maybe let's circle back and walk through that some more. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Let's go to Lucas and then Penny. Lucas, how are things going in your world? What's going on?
Things are going well. Last week I got a few interests on the space. I already got a few people pre-signing up. We can call their way. A lot of people exciting. We should start doing some remodeling next week. Just waiting for city permits and stuff, but we don't have much since the space is already built. Didn't decide on the name yet, so we're still working on that. And my next phase right now is we decided on the software they're going to use. We're going to use Nexodus. And my next phase now is getting the system ready, adding all the plans and everything. Mm-hmm. And I need to narrow down all the terms and conditions, privacy policy, all the fun stuff. That's the next on my list here. Some people came ask me about meetups, and if I have a contract or something like that, I don't have anything. I don't even know how much charge people for that. So that's my next challenge as well for large groups that wants to meet after business hours.
Gotcha.
So that's basically it for this week, I think.
Gotcha. And any thoughts in terms of, so with event programming and things coming in, do you see that as being something that could be an important revenue center for you, or are you more interested in it from the perspective?
Well, on my business plan, I kind of put a revenue, but I was, after thinking more and more, I don't know if that's going to be a good idea. I'd rather be open for events and meetups during the nighttime. I think that could generate more revenue than just regular co-working members coming to work,
In the
so
evening,
that's us kind of, date after 5-6 p.m.
And you just have one space that people would be coming to? Like if you have an event, is the event in the main co-working space?
Yeah, the hot desk area. Yes, we will transform the hot desk area into where the event is. And if you guys want, I can share the blueprint so you can see it.
Yeah.
Let me put on my upload. No, Dropbox. But that's my biggest challenge now, is figuring out those little details, because we do have a lot of groups here in the Tulsa, especially IT programmers that write a master me. How many people can you host? And we do have the fire limit of 49 people.
Okay.
So I'll sure maybe limit 40 people, because if we have 24 hours member at nighttime, we don't get in trouble. But
I'm sorry, they're limiting you to 40 people for an event?
49 people maximum inside the facility, because we don't have sprinklers. Yes, so that's kind of.
I ran into something like that with my space, because they consider me an office, not an event space, and offices and event spaces have different requirements or regulations, I guess, for how many people you can pack in. Mm-hmm. I mean, don't tell the fuzz, but I regularly have more people than what I'm.
Yeah, they said that you can have it, but if there's an accident, it's gonna be on you. Or if you have a large event, communicate us and we can come, or bring a fire truck and stay outside or something like that. I'm not expecting I don't expect having 50 people at the same time. I just sent you guys the blueprint, but I just need to be prepared. So I was thinking on the hot desk area there's a podium there that we put, if you open the blueprint, that's going to be big bags and stuff. So when there is a meeting, I'll just move the stuff out of the way and turn the hot desk area, put the chairs and make into to the event or the space.
I see. So it would be kind of in the, what would be the northeast corner, looking at the orientation, the top right corner would be the stage, and then all the people would kind of extend outward to the left in that narrow space.
That's correct.
Hot desk area.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah, so you're not going to have really excessive capacity there. You're not going to have 100 people in that space.
Probably not.
Right. You're
Probably
looking
not.
at.
And if you want to add the sprinklers, that's $40,000-$50,000 project there. So I don't want to get into that now.
Yeah. Yeah. So Lucas, when it comes to allocating your space for event programming, there's a lot of different ways you can approach it. I think, at this point in your project, you're probably wanting to get people in the door and get people excited about being in your space first and foremost, right? And so the event, hosting events in your space, getting people to come into your space and do stuff there is going to be potentially one of your primary marketing channels, right? And so what I'm curious about is how you can go about designing a event inventory for your space for events in a way that allows you to be generous with events that might be beneficial to bringing prospective members to your space, while also not making it something where you're just giving it away to anybody who wants event space off the street, right?
Yeah.
And so I was able to create a program for my space when I had the same issue, where I called it NWCU, and some of the materials for this are in the toolkit. But what it comes down to is there are groups that I want to be able to host, even if they can't pay. But I have to set very clear terms about how I engage them. So I don't just say, hey, it's free. I say, hey, if you want space, I will give it to you under these circumstances. And I have them go through an application process. But essentially what I do is I say, I'm going to sponsor you. So I'm offering you space in exchange for becoming a sponsor of your event, which means that you're going to list my space on your event site. You're going to thank us in the emails. You're going to thank us at the event. I'm going to have a chance to pitch my company at your event, right? And it's all tasteful, but it's all going to be, a requirement as far as part of this. And it's going to last for 3 months or 6 months, something like that. And you allocate a amount of time for sponsored events. So, if we know that, for example, it's really like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evenings are the prime event time. You've also got Monday, you've got Friday and the weekend, but more often than not, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 to 9 p.m., at least in my world, 6 to 9 p.m., that range is kind of prime time. So you could say, okay, among those 3 days a week every month that I have, I'm going to allocate 2 days a week to this thing and keep one open for other events that we want to do, right? Or you could say, 1 day a week or whatever it is. And then you allocate groups for that inventory based on what you have available. So if you have, 5 groups that want to use your space, you pick the 2 best ones, or, depending on how often they meet, maybe it's that several of them meet once a month. So you could have 4 groups meeting once a month. First Tuesday, second Tuesday, third Tuesday, fourth Tuesday, right? And so that's your inventory. You say, hey, I got Tuesdays. You want first Tuesday, second Tuesday, third Tuesday? That's what I got, right? But it helps you to have a sense of, I'm going to place spaces, or I'm going to place communities into these time slots, and that's my inventory. And I'm going to do this only once every 3 months or once every 6 months. And so that way, what we want to avoid is you having to deal with the high stress of people constantly coming to you saying, hey, can I rent your space? Hey, can I rent your space? Hey, can I have your space? For you to just say, hey, I got a form for that. And you do have a form. You could copy the form that I put in the toolkit. You say, fill out the form. I'm not going to look at the form until February 1st, but when I do, I will look at yours along with everyone else. and then I will make a decision about, you know, the spring lineup or whatever it is, right? And so then, you know, every 3 months or so, you look at what's in the form, you look at what you have available, and then, you know, you streamline it. And then, so that's like for the giveaway, right? You want to find stuff that's going to be useful for marketing your space. But then the other thing you could do is have a rate card. And for people that don't fit that model, you can, you know, determine this is what I'm going to rent the space for. And you can put that right on your website. Just say, this is what we rent it for, you know, and you might just say it's like a flat fee for a weekday night, where it's whatever it is that would be enough for you to be willing to stay late or to hire someone to stay late for that event. You know, so if it's $250, $300, $500, it's up to you, right? And we also have a rate card in the toolkit you can copy as well. Does that make sense?
Okay, that's very helpful, because I already have say 2 or 3 big company here that wants to host events here. They're already hosting the other co-working space, but I guess they're running out of spots there and they need another space. So it's a good problem to have, I guess.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you having interest from people that want to do events in your space is a great problem to have, because that's going to, you know, give you an opportunity to figure out how to manage that well. And then once you do, it becomes a very powerful marketing channel for you. And it can become a revenue generator as well. But I would say that, like, unless you want to get into like the business of, you know, event management, it's probably not going to be like something that's going to make you rich, right? So it's like, it could help the bottom line in terms of your margin, you know, instead of it being just break even, that it helps produce that extra bit of profit. But I've also found that it tends to cost a bit in terms of labor for somebody to stay late and deal with it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm going to paste my rate card from the toolkit into the chat.
And do you have on your toolkit, do you have any contract agreement or anything there, or no?
Good. For the event organizer?
Yes.
So yeah, I have in the rate card that I just sent you, the second page is an event agreement, and it just has some very basic language in it, but doesn't hurt to give it a look.
Got it.
Cool.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Tony.
All right, great. And cool. Well, if we have more that you want to talk to there, we could come back to it. In the meantime, we haven't heard from Penny yet, so I want to say hi to Penny. Penny, how are things going in your world?
Good. I just was glancing at that rate card. That looks really helpful, Tony. Yeah. So my world, things are going pretty good here. We're up to 20 members. We're still adding members. We've got 2 people who are interested. I finalized a group of people who are going to be my advisors, because making all these decisions in a vacuum is just, I don't know, it's overwhelming and not a good idea. And so there are 4 people who are helping out with that. And so we'll meet in January, but I know them all already. And they do know each other, but it's nice to be able to just compose an email and say, okay, this is the thing that's been on my mind. And what do you guys think about this? And to have people just kind of weigh in, like it's, I don't know, it's really good. You know, one of the issues for me is that in a 31-day month, whatever, I didn't want to be misrepresenting my rates, because people have individual offices here, right? And so I've promised them, you know, here's your rate. If you're taking it for 10 hours a week, which is 40 hours a month, here's your rate. But then if it's 5 weeks in a month, they could actually end up using the room a whole lot more. Anyway, whatever. But so we've worked it out, and everybody feels like it's okay if they use it more. And I hit them with the, you know, an extra $15 an hour for the room, as long as I'm clear about it up front. And so I found that I was kind of worried about it, and I really did need input, and it was really helpful. So I like having this team that I can just consult with.
That's great. I'm so glad that you're doing that. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more, because we haven't talked much actually in this group about putting together advisory groups and the structure and the maintenance of that. And I feel like there's so much we could talk about there.
Well, good. Yeah, because I'm right at the beginning of the whole thing. One of the people wanted to know how to get off, and so I haven't, whatever. You can get off whenever you want to get off, but it'd be nice to give me a month notice or something. But as far as the structure goes, I don't know, having 4 people in addition to myself, I think is good, because then there's like a tiebreaker. It's an odd number of people. Even if I get kind of the ultimate authority to make a decision, there would be certain things that maybe I don't feel super uber strongly, and I'd like to, empower people to make the decision. As far as kind of like what the responsibilities are so far, I think the responsibilities are mostly just to be available for questions, weigh in honestly and truthfully, and then bring to me anything, or bring to the group anything that they are finding as a concern. So I got people who are at kind of like different levels. But beyond that, I don't have a structure developed.
Right. Okay. Cool. So it sounds like, there's a couple different ways of approaching this, and you can do this pre-launch too, so maybe we start with talking about the different forms that a group could take in these advisory capacities, because I think there's, in some cases, subtle but really important nuance or language around it. And then we could talk about, diving deeper into one of these groups. So for example, pre-launch, one of the things that I've done and been part of is what I would call a steering committee. And that phrase is, my understanding of that phrase is that it's meant to be inherently temporary, to navigate an inherently temporary time, such as during the formation of a new organization or during the pre-launch of a new co-working space, something along those lines, so that it's a group that is acting in an advisory capacity, but also acting in an inherently temporary advisory capacity to get through like this phase. And what I love about a steering committee, when you're pre-launch with like a new program that you're going to do in the space or something like that, is that you're not making a long-term commitment, and you might ask people to be a part of that who you wouldn't ask to be a part of a perpetual commitment, right? And so somebody on the steering committee might be someone who has connections to like construction people in town, or or somebody who would be helping you with fundraising, in the onset or something like that, or like furniture purchasing, something like that, where those people wouldn't be on a permanent advisory board, but they would be indispensable in a launch board, right? And I just said board. I am going to draw a very clear distinction on the word board in a second, but so steering committee is one. And then I like thinking of there being at least 2 other kind of permanent constructs that can exist. One, which I would call an advisory committee or an advisory group, and then a board. And the word board has really powerful connotations, because in certain contexts that means decision-making power. In nonprofits, the board is the ultimate construct, right? There's an executive director, but the executive director serves a term that is determined by the board, and the board can get rid of the executive director. And so part of why people, decide profit or nonprofit is, where does the power go? And in a nonprofit, the power is on the board. It doesn't mean that a single person can't effectively have dictatorial control over a nonprofit, but at least on paper, it has to be through a board, where the board has the ultimate decision-making power. So
keep talking. I'm just grabbing my paper.
Okay. So in terms of, where we go with a co-working space, I think that, you don't go board unless you have a really specific reason to. And I think that makes the most sense if you're doing something at maybe a larger scale. But a formal board can be something that can be indispensable if you're trying to raise money, if you're trying to go to that larger level. Then having people in that formal capacity is important. And if you're going to be a nonprofit, then you have to have a board. So that's,
So using the word board is in some ways misleading, because like now that you're using these other words, I mean, committee is better. Board, it does sound kind of heavy and formal, and I don't want it to be heavy and formal. I just want people to just be talking with me.
Right. Yeah. So the distinction there that I think is okay is if you say advisory board, like as long as you're using that language, then it's connoting non-decision making power. So you know, if you just say board or board of directors or something like that, then you're in trouble. Like board member. But if you say advisory board member, that kind of thing, then I think you're fine. And so I think the advisory board is a really valuable construct, and we should all, aspire to have one eventually. And I would also say it can be informal. Like once you formalize it, things get sticky and whatever. So you could go informal with it for a while, which is literally like once a quarter, you email the people that you want to be there and you ask them all out to dinner, and like, so in that way, you sidestep the complications of conferring title and the complications of maybe like a person who thinks they should be on your advisory board, but you don't want them to be, like
I
things like
kind of wondered about that because like I, selected these 4 people, and when other people, I'm like, kind of, what are other people going to say when they realize they have an advisory board and I didn't ask them?
Yeah. So there's ways around that too. And I forget how we did this. We did something like this, and I'm trying to think of the language around it. But, oh man. Well, I'll just say, so I just created kind of three basic constructs here. On the one end, like the steering committee, which is very light and temporary. The other end is the board, which is decision-making power. In this middle was this advisory board. And I'm trying to remember how we did it, but we kind of had 2 groups within this realm where we had kind of I think it was more based on like partnerships and non-member related activity, and then more like a member advisory group. So I would have people who are members of the space who would be acting in an advisory capacity, and that we had them kind of act as a group as well. And then we also had a group of people who were not necessarily day-to-day members of the co-working space, but who were, for example, hosting partnered programming in our space, or they were a sponsor of our organization or something like that. So I'm just trying to remember the language I used for it. And if I think of it, I'll let you know. But that, it is possible to have some sense of special designation. And it might just be that like the group of people that you wouldn't want to be in the like VIP high level advisory group gets to have their own group. And that means you all, get together and, meet as like friends and members in a separate context. And, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Then I can always be asking people about their opinions on various things. So like as things do come up, I let people know that, it's the first time we've encountered this, and I'd love your opinion on it and how to kind of navigate through it. And so I think just trying to have that open relationship where people know they can come to me and I value their input has been helpful.
Yeah, it's just a matter of like, is there a point past which it makes more sense for you to just try to consolidate these people into one conversation to save you a little time and energy, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to have too many conversations. I mean, there's so many details. God, I've only got 20 people here, and there's so many details all the time. I'm even a detail person, actually. I can do detail, but there's just so many different things going on. It's like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like there's also this issue of, so one of the issues that we want to just like play with, and there's room, is status, because conferring status does give people this greater sense of I'm part of something, I'm going to advocate for it, I could put it on my website, like I'm proud of that. But it also is inherently exclusionary. And so there is this sense of who is the person who thinks they ought to be on it, who isn't, and is that an issue, right? So, my way of playing with that is one, to just not confer status until you really feel like you have to, and 2, to play that game of like, kind of having 2 groups, because like the local, credit union bank owner might be on your advisory board, right? But they're not going to have the same conversation with you that like your super member is going to have with you, like your 5 or 10 biggest super member fans are going to have. And so those are just different.
I hadn't really thought about having a separate kind of like board or committee. Originally I had a steering committee, but I was still calling it advisors. But yeah, having like the head of Radius Cowork here in town, a successful co-working space, so having Sean on it. And so, yeah, this is helpful because now I've got this advisory board that is made up of members, but then kind of keeping a place for maybe some other people who have experience that could also advise.
Yeah. And it's 2 different meetings, because
right.
like you want to be able to talk to Radius person once a quarter and report to them what's going on and then get their advice on a high level about a major decision you have to make business wise.
Right.
But then you also want to be able to have, members get together and talk about day-to-day issues in the space. Like, should we get an espresso machine? Should we change the coffee we buy? Right. Like that kind of stuff, which it's just totally different audiences. Yeah. So I like the idea of whether formally or informally making your list of who's on both of those groups and engaging those people on a quarterly basis. And I would make that a recurring calendar thing, and recurring calendar entries, I think, are lifesavers in this world, where, something like we talked about, your anniversary party. When's your anniversary? Okay, cool. Now, 2 months before your anniversary party, you make a recurring calendar entry for plan the anniversary party, right? And you do the same
when you
thing.
Suggested that before. I did that. It's in my calendar.
And you put that on the calendar for the next 5-10 years, right? Like just stick it on there. If something changes, you can delete it later. But and the same thing you can do for quarterly, like revisit, advisors and convene them for a meeting, And I would say for the bigger picture advisors, what we've done is like when you're engaging the higher level, business people in town, whatever, is you can tell them, hey, there's a term for this. After the term, you can decide to move on if you want, right? So it's like a 1-year thing. These are the 4 meetings we're going to have, and these are the dates. Like right now, these are the dates for the rest of the year, right? And it's nice to just put that in their head. And then when they say yes, you send them calendar invites. And so, when the December meeting comes around in 2020, everyone's forgotten about it, but it's on everyone's calendar already. So they know, like, when it's November 2020 and someone's booking their calendar for December, they're going to see, oh, there's a meeting on the calendar already for December 4th, 2020. I got this advisory meeting. Okay, I'm busy, right? But like, you got that locked in now, so it's easier to ensure that these people who inherently have pretty tricky schedules to juggle have the greatest chance of, having it blocked out.
That's helpful.
Cool. Anything else on that front, Penny? I'm thinking that maybe this is a nice segue back to Jen and the idea of engaging members in advisory capacities.
Yeah, that's good.
Cool. Jen, can we talk about your summary? I'm not going to try to read it and talk at the same time because then I will do both very poorly. Do you want to tell us a little bit about other takeaways you got and just how, like, first of all, like, what's your vibe on the experience? And yeah, take us from there.
Yes. And just heads up, we had a little internet outage over here, so I'm hopefully won't get pulled away again.
Yikes.
Yeah, we've got both Comcast and AT&T, and we're finding that the failover doesn't always work the way that it should. So let me get that back up. What's it called? Town Hall. There it is. My takeover, extremely positive. It was really, really nice. We had about 2/3 of our members attend. We had lunch at the same time. Jessica made a really beautiful lunch, so that was nice and cozy. And yeah, it was just a really great give and take session, I thought. Good feedback from our members, which is really what we wanted. That was the main point of it. What else do you want to know? What can I tell you?
What's next? Or what are you wondering about as far as what's next?
Um, I guess how to take all of these notes. Penny, I don't think you saw.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Penny did though.
Wow.
Yeah. So how to take all that feedback and what to do first. And Jessica kind of laid that out nicely in the synopsis. So yeah.
One of my thoughts on what to do first, not that it's specific to your results, is something that people will recognize as something they came up with at that meeting that you are moving forward with, because then they'll feel important and they'll feel like their input is important.
Yeah, 100%. So it's just a matter of taking a look at what's on there and what to do first. Some of it is really simple stuff, like a couple people said they wanted a shredder, and another member said, hey, I've got a shredder that's been gathering mothballs in my closet at home. I'll bring it in. So boom, done, shredder. Awesome. Other things are more meaty, like the whole childcare thing. Yes. So it's just a matter of seeing what is actionable now versus long term.
And did you see opportunities for members to step up to make their own suggestions a reality? I mean, the shredder is an awesome micro example.
Yeah, actually, so one thing that's sticking out for me is, well, two things actually. One of them was a request to do designated times where we all eat lunch together, like total brown bag, but just, hey, everyone's going to be eating lunch together on this day. Come on and join us. And by everyone, it might be 4 people, 5 people, I don't know. But still, that's super easy, and people threw out some dates that worked for them. There was also a request for doing a family game night with kids and parents, and again, we talked through that, and people came up with a time of year, time of day, what games they wanted to bring, so that was pretty cool.
Did you see, for example, with that, do you see that as being something that you would run, or with their help, or do you see someone maybe being able to own that? A member?
Possibly a little bit of both. We I think by the very nature of who our members are, I'm a little hesitant of asking them to do too much, because they are already doing so much. I mean, we've got the majority of our members are parents of young children, and we're all in the trenches of parenthood. So the other day I was thinking about, what can we do around the holidays? Oh, what if we did a cookie exchange? And then I heard the record scratch. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to do a cookie exchange. I don't want to bake. The idea of putting that on my plate at the holidays, are you kidding me? If somebody really, really wants to do a cookie exchange and they want to do it with 5 other people, great. But I don't know. I know that for myself, I'm so stretched, and I know that my members are too.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing that I want to understand, because part of what happens with town halls is inherently we end up with way more ideas than we could ever have the resources to implement. And a lot of it comes down to ownership. So, a family game night, great idea. Who here has the energy to own it? If no hand goes up, then it doesn't happen, and that's on your staff or on the member's side, right? And it could be that the person who owns it doesn't have to do a lot. They just have to make sure that the thing happens, right? They have to put out the call for volunteers, or, you can make it something that's virtually 100% autopilot.
Oh, Tony, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. It has to be somebody that makes sure that it happens, and that they're committed to showing up. They're committed to putting out the apple juice, whatever. So you can help to make it as simple as possible for a person to own it, but someone has to own it. And, you know, I wonder about, I guess, so like now, you know, the event's over. So it's like, does this fit into something you and Jessica were already going to do, in the sense that, like, you know, staff wise, you have the ability to run X events every month. So one of those events is going to be this. So it's fine. We got the feedback we need to know what event we're going to run with the resources we have. Otherwise, it's, hey, I heard there was this good idea. If somebody wants to own it, reply and let us know. And then if nobody replies, it doesn't happen, right? But like, that's your step, is to like promote it to the community. Say, hey, we had this awesome idea for a game night. If somebody wants to run it, let us know and we'll support you every which way we can, right? And so in that way, you're kind of leaving it to the community if it's something that doesn't fit into your existing plan.
I hear that. I think that asking someone to own it will be really overwhelming. And I think I liked what you started to say, something about, like, you know, what's something that they can do that is easy.
Yeah.
Because I do think that, you know, having that that buy-in is super important. And I think that, you know, things like this coming from the members mean more than if it comes from me or from Jessica. So I don't know. I think we need to find a balance. And maybe this is one of those things that I talk to with my fellow space owners that target parents. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, part of why
I really worry about adding to people's stress.
You know,
it's supposed to be a sanctuary space.
I think about that too, and I'm, you know, working with a lot of people. Only a few people now have kids, you know, the younger ages. But I think it's also just part of being someone who doesn't want to burden people, right? And so in some ways it is hard to ask for help. In some ways I have, but in other ways I feel like they come here and I want it to be simple and easy for them. And so, like, what business is it of mine to be asking them for help? But then, Tony, I know that's not what you're talking about, but I find that I have some kind of an internal resistance to asking them to help. Although things are switching for me because my mom was just diagnosed with cancer, unfortunately. She lives in Cincinnati. And so, like, I've got to go tomorrow morning. I've got to go down for whatever different kinds of meetings and stuff. And so I'm not going to be here. And so people are kind of stepping up, but it feels kind of awkward even to ask people to step up.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry, Penny.
Thank you very much.
And, you know, anytime you deal with something like that, we also have to think about, you know, how can you account for your needs and communicate about it in a way, you know?
Yes.
So, yeah. I think part of what has worked for me is asking a group, because if I'm asking a whole group, then if nobody responds, then nobody's willing, and so be it. But if somebody responds, then they proactively are telling me that they're willing to do this thing, and then I'm getting out of my own way. Because I could say, oh yeah, my members are too busy all the time. But a lot of times people are really wanting to feel useful and they want to contribute. And so, you know, giving people opportunities to step into that space is good. I think where you fall into trouble is if you need a member to do something and none of them steps up, and now you're like, well, now I have to really make a push for it. But it doesn't sound like we're talking about that with most of what we're talking about here. You know, if we do fall into that situation, I think that's a more specific problem we have to solve. You know, we have to diagnose that particular issue, right? Does that make sense? I mean, like, so like, for example, Jen, what I'm picturing is when you go back through these notes, you say, okay, based on the resources we have, we can commit to these things. But there are these other things we can't commit to, and we really would love to see them happen. And are there things there that it would not feel wrong for you to just put out to the newsletter, say, hey, this is a good idea, we want to support it every which way we can. If someone's really on one point on it, we'll support you. Otherwise, we'll revisit it next year. And like, that's, you know, that's just the way that it is. It's a balancing act because I want to manage your energy. And I know after a town hall, it's so easy to get overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like the idea that, like, a lot of the notes that I'm seeing seem to be one-time changes that you can make, or like decisions that you're making about a given thing. changing up the music, you know, getting a shredder, that kind of thing.
Jen, remind me when you opened. So like how many months has it been from your opening to this first town hall?
We opened in March. So 8 months.
8, 9
Okay,
months.
that
Yeah.
sounds,
Yeah.
because I don't think we're ready for a town hall. I don't think we have kind of enough cohesiveness, but you know, if we can do it at 6 months or at 8 months, that would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the timing was perfect, actually.
That's good. Well, and you know, you can set whatever frequency makes sense. And you know, for you, Penny, if you're coming up on, if you need help with a specific thing, like if there's a reason you feel the need to convene your members, then you can, you know, you don't need to call, you don't need to use the phrase town hall, right? You could say like, I want to get everybody together to talk about a specific thing.
Well, I did notice that, Jen, one of your suggestions was to have a closed Facebook group, and that we actually do have a closed Facebook group, and it seems to work pretty good because you can tell when people have read it. I mean, maybe you can tell when specific people have read it, but you know, it says there's 20 people and it says 18 people have read it. So you're like, okay, people are paying attention to this. They don't always comment, but it's nice to know that, yeah, they're kind of like seeing it. That's a helpful thing to know. And then they really can weigh in there anytime they want to. And other people do seem to be paying attention. So it seems to be working for us. I never did start the Slack because a lot of therapists aren't too tech savvy anyway. And a lot of people, I think, don't want someplace else. And it seems like all therapists are on Facebook. So it was an easy enough thing to do it that way. And that is actually being successful for us, I'd say, the closed Facebook group.
Yeah, we had multiple votes for, somebody wrote down Facebook group for sure, not Slack. And we had several votes for that. And only 1 vote for Slack. So yeah, we'll do a Facebook group.
Yeah, I maintain Slack only makes sense if you are, well, for certain audiences for one, but then if you're facilitating online community deliberately as part of your strategy, and that you have specific days and times when you activate that Slack space. So if you knew that, like, you know, if somebody were running a community program on Slack where you said like, day house, start your week goal setting chat, you know, every Monday at 9 a.m. we're going to jump into Slack and all set our goals for the week. Then you know that like it's going to be popping for that half hour. And then maybe people will stick around and chat, but like that's the only way that Slack makes sense to me. I have seen people.
Ooh, you just.
Huh?
I was going to say, you just gave me a good idea. I'm totally going to steal what Kat Johnson does with like the Monday accountability and stuff like that on Facebook.
Oh yeah, you absolutely should steal it.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry, what were you going to say?
I've always thought that her posting was like a stroke of genius for her getting engagement in that group.
It's like she's a content expert or something.
And that's beyond content though. That's like community engagement strategy. That's just like so good. I mean, it's literally just a picture that gets posted. You know, it could be on a schedule, and it works so incredibly well. I might need to steal this too. Actually, I'm realizing there's a context that I'm not using it in that it could be. Everybody steal Kat's idea. It's a good thing. We got a few minutes left, or where do we want to go? Where do we want to go from here? We could change topics. We could stay with this. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep reading Jen's notes and finding stuff to talk more about.
I have stuff. I always want to have stuff.
Yeah. Hit us with it.
But it's more operational. It's more operational since I'm in that phase now. Question: do you guys have more than one internet provider? And do you have alarm in your co-working space?
An alarm, like a burglar alarm, like a security system?
Yes. My question for that is because people have 24 hours access, but I don't expect them to come and turn off an alarm, and disarm the alarm, you know?
I would have cameras, at least one at the door. We used Nest.
Yeah, we had that.
And you can pay for different levels of service, but I think we paid for a service that gave us at least 24 hours of back recording and you could pay for
Mhm.
like, I think there was a time we paid for even further back. So you always have video from the last 24 hours or the last week or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And you could check in from wherever you are from your phone. You could,
Yeah,
have
yeah.
a look at the camera. And we found it incredibly valuable just to be able to tell, the next morning something's out of sorts. Who was the last person out last night? Let's go back and roll the
Mhm.
tape. And with Nest, we were able to see events. So it would, you wouldn't have to fast forward through, hours and hours and
Yeah,
hours of
okay.
video. It would
Mhm.
show you when there was activity. So something like somebody turning the lights off and closing the door is, pretty easy to pick out. And so then you could see this was the last person who left. This was what time they left, and you could even see, well, maybe somebody else came in later and then left. So, just having that
Mhm.
record I found to give me a lot of peace of mind as far as
Mhm.
worrying about the space. Um, and then as far as your other question around, um,
Alarm.
yeah, so, well, no, previous to that, you had asked about what Jen was talking about earlier. What was your question? Why am I missing it now?
I just forgot you.
Damn it. Jen was just talking about it too, because she dealt with it.
uh,
Oh, internet connection, backup internet. So,
yeah.
Jen, maybe you can tell us about yours. I'll tell you about mine. You want to go for it?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So we have Comcast as our primary. We have the 150 gig, 150 megabyte service
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
a 6,000 square foot space, which is just fine.
How many
I was
again?
told 150 megabyte. I was told
What,
that I'm sorry,
what
150
what's your
megabyte,
what's your square footage?
6,000 square foot.
Okay, thank you.
I was told that the 1 gig was overkill, and yeah, we're blazing fast at 150.
Good to know.
And on most days, we have roughly 10 people in the space. And maybe as we grow, 150 will be inadequate. I don't know. And then we also have a backup system, which we've had not great luck with it kicking in, and that's AT&T, and it's really low. I can't even remember. 50 megabytes something. It's basically just enough for us to theoretically hobble along on,
Mhm.
and make our wireless, our doors accessible, and a few other like key services. But like, everyone's going to have to stop streaming Netflix
Yeah.
if we have to kick over to AT&T. All that being said, we've had some problems with our equipment recognizing when there's a failover, and I've got to do some testing eventually on that. So it's on my list of things to do. But yeah, I would absolutely get a backup.
Okay,
Because
perfect.
it's one thing if you are working for a company and the internet goes down, then it's like, whoa, party at the water cooler. Or if you're at Starbucks and the internet goes down, well, that's not what you're primarily there. But I feel like at a co-working
Mhm.
space, like it's so vital to the services that we provide, that it's like, I feel terrible when the internet goes down for even a few minutes.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's helpful because I was looking for the 1 gigabyte. It was so expensive. Like this might be too much.
Yeah. Yeah. I would start lower. You can always go up. They'll take
Yeah.
your money.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
thank
would
you.
assume that as it gets more popular that you will need to upgrade, like for you,
Mhm.
Jen, I wouldn't be surprised if one day you get that call. And I'll say it's in part because, I mean, people saturate internet connections with all kinds of crazy shit, but it's such an important part of people's quality of experience in the space that, like, if they're on a Zoom meeting, they can't have that Zoom meeting lag and say connection issues because they run their whole business on it. And on top of that, if they know that you could be doing more and you're not, like, you don't want to be in that position of like, well, I could pay for faster internet, I just don't want to pay for it. Like, we're internet brokers, as much as we are anything at the core of the business stuff. So you get away with it as long as you can, but also prepare to pay that extra amount for the higher amount one day. And yeah, having a backup is an awesome plan. it's an expense, and it's one that a lot of people don't take. But when you're above 5,000 feet, I think it's certainly worth looking into. And that secondary internet could be relatively affordable. So, you know, it's not the biggest hit to do. I know that at Newark City, we had a main internet. I don't remember. I think it was maybe 500 megabit, and or less. I don't remember exactly. It changed a lot. But we had, I think we got like 2 lines of like cable internet, and that was the big expense, the main connection. But then we had a whole separate infrastructure running on a Verizon DSL connection, which is a lot lower in speed, but there were plenty of times when we had issues with our main connection, and everyone could just seamlessly jump on the backup network without even thinking twice about it. And we had that running on separate hardware too, so we had like separate routers for it and everything. So regardless of where the issue was in the chain of infrastructure, odds were good. Odds were very low that we would be completely offline. Like if we were completely offline, it was probably because there was like a citywide problem. So, you know, that helped a lot.
Thank you.
And you don't need to do it right away. So like, I think what we did was our backup internet was our main internet for the first few weeks or whatever, until we got the hardware we needed to get the main internet up and running. So you could do it one way or you could do it the other way, where you get one connection, buy yourself a couple of months, and then, you know, you could get the backup connection, you could get the other connection later.
Got you. Thank you.
Cool. All right, it's 1:02. Y'all,
Yes.
I'm so thankful for all of you. I'm thankful that we get to do this. It's been so fun to do this the last few years, and I like that we've got a nice number of folks who've been doing it for a while, so we have some context. And hope all y'all get a chance to get away from your email and all the madness. You get, you know, co-working space owners don't get a lot of 3-day weeks, so I hope they're able to take it and enjoy it.
I'm thankful for this group also. Very thankful.
Yes. Same here.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, have a great holiday, and I will see you on the other side of it in December.
Happy
See
Thanksgiving.
you guys. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.